All right, and here we are. Let me know when you guys can hear me and if it's loud and clear. Also, let me know if you can hear that train, because that's funny that that's going by right when I'm starting. But yeah, tell me both in the Discord and, of course, in the live chat as well. And then I will know that we can get started. All right, still waiting for confirmation from people. You can hear me well. There we go. Thank you. It's always interesting to see how long the delay is, too. All right. Well, yeah. So this is the end of July loose ends. This is where I go through all of the things that we have been discussing for the past month, talk about things happening in the future, and most importantly, take questions both from patrons. Of course, if you join the Patreon, you can submit questions for free ahead of time, and I do a little bit of research beforehand, but then also from people live on air in the chat. So a super chat will make me more likely to notice your question. And this is just a great way for me to just show you guys, ask me anything. I have nothing to hide. I'm willing to talk about whatever you want. And we should do that once a month. And as often happens with a live stream, I get some information that I feel compelled to leak. And at the top of this, I'm just going to want to jump right into it because it actually is very big information. And I'll be looking away at my notes here. So I won't be looking right at the camera the whole time. So forgive me. But so yeah, at least as of now, Beast Lake is canceled. Now, for those who don't know, link will be in the description to remind you of the first time this was leaked by the channel. This was supposed to be really the full realization of the Royal Core project, which of course is the much hyped up architecture that Jim Keller was working on when he got hired by Intel. This was supposed to be the one, their next Zen moment to take on AMD head on again. And unfortunately, basically what I'm hearing is it's kind of falling apart. This whole Royal Core thing. Like Beast Lake, for example, sounded really interesting. It's supposed to have 32 little cores and 4 extra big P cores for just world breaking, world shattering, single threading performance. That is canceled. And basically, what I'm told is that whether it was like new kinds of cache and rentable units. There's a bunch of interesting things they're thinking of doing with the Royal Core architecture as just new envisioning of the future of Intel CPUs. All of those parts of it are being taken apart now and just kind of being made into their own projects to be put into upcoming core architectures. So hopefully Nova Lake will of course still get um rentable units. To be clear, there's a reason I didn't put in the title rentable units canceled nor Royal Core canceled. You could argue that Royal Core is like not really working the way it was supposed to anymore, like moving forward anymore. But in reality, it's just they don't think they can get to where they want to be in one project. And so they're kind of axing half of it and putting the others into other things. So I can't really say Royal Core is canceled, nor that rentable units won't come out. But what I can say is Beast Lake is canceled, and this doesn't instill confidence in the virality of the Royal Core project. Then, right? I mean, Beast Lake was supposed to be like Intel's Zen 1 or Zen 2. Nova Lake was supposed to be like an early realization of Royal Core, and Arrow Lake was supposed, yeah, that was Nova Lake, and then Arrow Lake was supposed to be the bridge to the Royal Core family of products. And now what we're seeing is what Arrow Lake's going to have more than 14% IPC, but not as high as they were hoping to get, I don't think. And Beast Lake's canceled, and I just have to call into question how good everything post Arrow Lake will be. Like, this is me just openly saying, like, whatever I've leaked about performance of things coming after Arrow Lake, I'm not gonna double down on any of that anymore after what I've heard about Beast Lake and all this other stuff being canceled. So it's very unfortunate. And the way I would close this leak is this. I think it is abundantly obvious that Jim Keller left Intel way sooner than he was supposed to. He was only there for 2 years. You know, Jim Keller left because of all the political infighting and the backstabbing. Like, I heard things like Murthy, who of course is no longer at Intel, would try to get people fired that worked for like Raja Kadori or Jim Keller just to spite them so that they would be behind on a project and he would look better than them. Like, that's the type of just truly malicious backstabbing and political infighting that was going on at Intel at the time. I think Jim Keller said, yeah, I don't really care. Anyone will hire me. Like, Jim Keller could go to Apple tomorrow and be like, I want to work for Apple. And Apple would say, well, we don't have a job for you, but now we do. They would create one. And he realized, I don't need to put up with this crap. So he left Intel. And if you think about when he left AMD, like he left AMD like a couple years before Zen 1 launched. But by that time, remember, it takes 5 years to make something. By that time, he had basically mapped out Zen 1, Zen 2, and Zen 3 and had early work done on Zen 4. So AMD knew what to do. They had a North Star and a North Star after that, if you will, and they were ready to innovate and go. I think it's very obvious that Jim Keller should have spent at least another 3 to 5 years so that the pretty much all the design work was just done with Arrow Lake, and most of it was done with Nova Lake before he left. And him being jumping out of the company, I just think basically he was halfway done designing Royal Core, left, and now it's the project's kind of fallen apart. So that's really unfortunate. This isn't the news any Intel investor would want to hear right now, but it is the truth. So I just thought I would communicate that to you all today. And it's just becoming very hard for me to see the light at the end of the tunnel anymore, people. I'm just being honest here. I mean, what's next? I mean, these disastrous earnings, which I guess, let me put down a timestamp for that. I do want to talk about Intel's earnings that are cratering their stock price and really cratering the silicon market right now. Unfortunately, there's other factors causing that as well right now. I think the AI bubble may be starting to pop, honestly. But, here's what I want to say about Intel's earnings. All right. I'm going to, again, links in the description backing all this up. So I want to compare AMD's earnings this year to AMD's earnings 10 years ago, quarter two 2014. Same with Intel, quarter two 2014. In quarter two of 2014, Intel brought in $13.8 billion of revenue. In that same quarter, AMD brought in only $1.44 billion. They're making so little money, they actually had two decimal places there. And then at that same time, quarter two 2014, AMD had less than 10,000 employees. Intel had around 107,000 employees at that time. Now compare that. Intel has what would that be, like 9 times the revenue, I believe, or around there. 9 times the revenue, 11 times the employees to today. Today we have a situation where Intel's bringing in $12.8 billion. So less money than they were making this quarter 10 years ago, which you consider inflation is horrible. And yet now they have 125,000 employees. They have more employees than before, and they're bringing in less revenue. And their competitor, AMD, in quarter two brought in $5.8 billion with 26,000 employees. Think about that too. AMD is making, what is that, like 1 to like 3 times, I think, yeah, more than 3 times the revenue. And yet they haven't even tripled the amount of their employees. That tells you they're making a lot of profits. With less than triple the people, they're making more than triple the money. Intel now has, what is that, like 15% more people and is making like 5% less money. That's really bad. Intel cannot do this anymore. They're just too big. I think they thought they could tough it out. They could brute force their way past AMD becoming competitive again. That has not happened. And now Intel has to become smaller. You cannot be 5 times the size of your competitor, 5 times the headcount, 5 times the mouths to feed, and be only bringing in twice the money. That is a recipe for bankruptcy. And that's what we saw come out today in Intel's earnings. And yeah, they're going to have to cut a lot of jobs. And look, that's really sad. I mean, I obviously, because of the leaks I talk to tons of Intel employees, and they're really smart, great people. But so I'm not like, I would never hate on them, but I would say, at some point, the executives and the leadership at Intel are going to have to start answering for their stupid decisions. I mean, really? You're going to bet on like x86 phones when the phone market's already established. And what are you going to do after that? Oh, you're going to buy McAfee for $7 billion, or maybe that was before that, probably. Both dumb things to do, though. And then after that, what are we going to do? We're going to bet everything on the graphics card market right when the graphics card market is crashing instead of AI when the AI market is booming. What a misallocation of funds. And yeah, I mean, I'll get to some more questions about this later on in this live stream, but it's like Intel's got to stop launching products no one wants. Like, from my impression of what's going to happen with Battle Mage is that OEMs don't want it, AIBs don't want it. They canceled the laptop versions of Battle Mage besides Lunar Lake, of course. And what's going to end up happening is like a crazy small launch of limited editions only by them. And then, probably Gunner. I think, who else did I hear? Is this probably an exclusive leak? I think I heard BioStar is going to make an Intel GPU at some point. Like I know that they want to go through and do that, and they probably will. But if they do that, they're stupid. Like Intel, you are way too big, and you need to start cutting the right things. You can't just keep going on with this dream of we're going to do all this stuff because I say we're a GPU company, Pat. You're not a GPU company. You fucking failed, dude. And now you've got to fire tens of thousands of people because of this stupid pipe dream that was never going to work out. That's my opinion on what's going on right now with Intel. And honestly, if they actually tried to push a big Battle Mage launch, I would go, yeah, they're going out of business because that tells me they're not learning anything. So the good news, though, well, I guess I'll say the other bad news first is Intel's employees are in complete panic right now. The people I talk to and the people they talk to, I mean, they're like, it's just apocalyptic. I probably shouldn't drag on it because it's just sad. But the only thing I heard that seemed good is there is an understanding now that things are bad. I'm starting to hear, and that they really can't keep acting like the old Intel. They really need to take things seriously now. Having said that, in the earnings call, Pat Gelsinger basically the entire time just avoided talking about the competition and the mistakes this company has made. And it was like basically the same crap you hear in all Intel earnings calls, which is like, it's market conditions. We're noticing a downturn in the market. Motherfucker, AMD's revenue's up. It is not a down market, dude. It's a booming market that you're not booming in. And if I keep hearing those things in Intel's earnings call, then I don't think they've changed because they need to start acknowledging the mistakes they've made and that it isn't just a down market, that they have made mistakes. And until they acknowledge that mistakes that they've made, why would I think they're going to know how to solve them? You can't solve a problem unless you admit you have a problem. So that's my analysis of Intel's earnings. You know, you can't be 5 times the size of AMD and only make double the money. Yeah, Royal Core seems like it's in a lot of trouble, people. Not the most optimistic thing to open up about, at the beginning of this video, but it is what it is. Oh, and I guess the last thing I would say here is consider that they're not even talking about the Intel Raptor Lake and maybe some Sapphire Rapids from oxidation failures in these earnings calls yet. I mean, so the stock is this bad and this isn't even hitting investors? Now, I talked to an analyst today about this, and the person told me, well, you have to understand that that's a big problem, but we're actually more concerned right now about the fact that Intel has all these 10 nanometer fabs that are empty. That's a bigger problem than Raptor Lake failing, actually. And I get it, but consider that the mainstream investor still doesn't really know about the Raptor Lake failures, and yet their stock's this low. Food for thought, people. But I guess that is where I will pivot to an ad from Micro Center. Do you have a broken CPU that you need to replace? Maybe replace it at Micro Center, or maybe go there for a new Strix laptop. They're a great sponsor of this channel. I've been working with them for years. And right now, if you look at the links in the description, they've got the Creality Ender 3 V2 3D printer for $99. And they also have a free 128 gigabyte USB flash drive. If you sign up for the Micro Center Miami information, again, just a free flash drive. Anyone, you can be an existing Micro Center customer. Just go there, sign up, go there. They'll give you a free flash drive, and it's a fast one too, I believe. Also, you can shop Micro Center's build your own month deals, and they have a Micro Center custom PC builder as well, which I've actually checked it out. It's pretty cool. You can go on Micro Center's website right now and then customize your build like you're ordering from like a system integrator, and then buy it, tell them to build it, drive there at night, they'll have it done. That's all you got to do. Order the parts, put it together on the configurator, go pick it up that same day if you're busy. So, yep, I want to thank Micro Center for sponsoring this piece of content. And remember, buying from them or even just clicking on the links in the description helps the channel a ton. So, yeah, check out Micro Center today. All right, moving on to more optimistic discussion here. Let's talk about AMD's earnings. So I actually don't have that much to say about the earnings themselves. I know there are a lot of people with hot takes about it, but if you look, I mean, AMD is doing well in client. I think I saw, if I'm remembering right, they're like 50 to 60% up year over year in like laptop sales and desktop. It's like, that's crazy, especially in a downturn or somewhat of a downturn. I don't know. Actually, it's a mixed bag. It's not really a downturn, but I would say that consumer purchasing is a little down right now. And yet AMD's up 50%. That's outstanding. Data center is going supernova. I mean, the data center is just insane. And really, the only dark spot I saw was embedded. Embedded is down a lot. I'm not an expert on this, so I don't know why. But I think anyone that would try to couch AMD's earnings as mediocre or lukewarm, I would just go, dude, they're taking data center and client in record time while their main competitors falling apart. I think they're doing great. Now, graphics, gaming, yeah, gaming revenue is down, but we're watching the implosion of Xbox right now. So that's not helping AMD's gaming revenue. And then at the same time, don't forget, I leaked this, people, that AMD had this rebate scheme for how they sold their cards and then gave rebates back after people sold Radeon cards at cost. And because you have a rebate system where you're like giving people money in the back end after every month of sales, that means if sales go down, then a quarter that looked extra good, the next quarter is going to look extra bad. And they're still dealing with the fallout of that accounting method they do. So I think the GPU market is clearly down. I mean, look at Nvidia cutting production of Nvidia of graphics cards. Google it; they are. Just in general, this is not a market you should launch graphics cards in. And so that's why I would say the embedded one was the one where I'm like, that seems bad because I expect the GPU market to be down probably next quarter too. Well, yeah, probably next quarter too. It's just a down market. The only good thing for AMD and also hopefully for us consumers about the GPU market being down is I think people are just like bored. I mean, admit it, right? Everyone, you're bored of graphics cards this year. Like RDNA 3, Lovelace were interesting. Some of them were overpriced and had dumb names, but more or less it was interesting. We had our first chiplet GPU. Nvidia had new levels of efficiency we've never seen before. 4090 was crazy powerful. But this year it's just a bit boring. The graphics is a bit boring. And I think it's justifiable that people are bored. But what I think that means is, yeah, let it be boring. Um, it's kind of like running my YouTube channel here. Like there are some quarters where people are just less interested in this content. And what I used to do is kill myself over trying to keep the numbers as high as they were before, even though I do get more views every year. So it's doing well. But there'd be down sections and you'd go, oh no, this is down. I got to kill myself. Nah, take a vacation. People are just less interested. And then what happens? Next month, views come right back because people are interested again. That's how I see the graphics card market right now if AMD plays their cards right. If by Christmas, or I'm still not sure, it's 100% sure it's launching this year. But if AMD can launch RDNA 4 before Christmas or even early next year at a really aggressive price, like, let's say they give you like 7900 XTX overall performance for $500 or 4080 performance for $549. Like, let's say they give you that and it just works great. We have FSR 3.2 or something. It's slick, it's fast, no issues whatsoever, super efficient. I think there's going to be pent up demand for graphics cards next year. So that's the good news for AMD. And I suppose probably also for Nvidia is that, look, people are bored right now with graphics cards. They bought a ton of them the previous few years as well. So people are just probably done buying them. And that's fine. AMD can focus on AI and data center. Nvidia will focus on AI. But this also means there will be, I'm sure, pent up demand next year for a really great graphics card. And if AMD is smart enough to deliver something with a really aggressive price that's, reasonable margins for them, though, of course. I don't think they'll be a charity, but as long as they actually push it that little bit like they did with the 7800 XT, where I think we all pretty much expected the 7800 XT. Well, I mean, I leaked it to be $500, I think, but I think most people were expecting at the time it'd be 549 or 600. Just 500. They're still making a lot of money on them, but it's that price everyone really wanted to be excited. They do something like that with the 8800 XT. I think it's going to sell gangbusters because there's going to be so much pent up demand because there just isn't any demand there right now. But it's because it's boring right now. And once it's not boring, if they hit it perfectly, I think it'll be a home run. All right. So that is my thought on AMD earnings. Remember, hit the like button, everybody. Also, I'm seeing more people say they're unsubscribed recently without trying to. Double check that you're subscribed right now. Like, I know that I think right now, the last month, it said 40% of people watching videos aren't subscribed. That really does help the algorithm and help us get more recognition and get more people interested in coming on as a guest. So make sure you subscribe to the More Slides YouTube channel, please, too, as well as liking this video. All right, so let me start getting into some of these questions here. Let's see. Should I just go through the Intel ones quickly, or let's stay on the AMD subject. We'll get back to the Intel question. So, all right, I've got Death Saved, who has a tipped question. Thank you for the tip. And his question is, any news on the Z2 Extreme APU? No, and I think this is an interesting one. Like, what will the Z2 Extreme be? If you look at the Fox's testing of like Zen 5 Strix, it's, if I'm remembering correctly, well, let me just pull it up here because I don't want to be wrong. The Fox Strix. videos. He just had one come out, didn't he? Come on, where is it? Yep. Go here and then look at the efficiency testing. What's really interesting is that oh, god dang it. Dead air. Let me see. I know I shared this too. Here we go. So yeah, looking at the efficiency and like the scaling of Strix, it's really interesting to see that yeah, it seems like we have the 3070 here. It really takes off in performance once you get to around 17 watts, and but then it becomes capped right around 33 watts. It's a weird situation here with Strix where it's very obvious to me that the CPU portion needs more power. But then it's also obvious to me that the GPU portion actually is at its sweet spot, seemingly around 30 watts because it just would need more bandwidth to scale much higher. But because it's a wider design compared to Hawkpoint, more compute units clocked lower, that also means that its low power usage efficiency is crazy. So when I look at all of this and you ask me what should the Z2 Extreme be, I think it's obvious that it doesn't need all of those 12 cores and that it could never power them, and that all of the power that you could should be going to that GPU, but that at a certain point it doesn't need more. So if at 33 watts it's kind of maximizing the GPU here, yeah, I mean, I think if you just disabled a lot of those CPU cores, it would be great. Who knows? In all likelihood, AMD will just make the Z2 Extreme be Strix with better tuning. But I would really clap for AMD if what they did is let it still have 16 compute units, or honestly, maybe even 12. Like the 80M is only at higher power consumption levels, like I think it was like 10% behind something with 50% more or 33% more compute units. So you could almost argue they should make it 12 CUs. But yeah, for efficiency reasons, you would probably want it to be 16 CUs, but then I might just disable all of the Zen 5 cores, like only Zen 5C, or maybe 2 Zen 5 cores and just 8 or even 6 or 4 Zen 5C, because I don't think it needs any more than that. I think that'd be perfectly balanced. But no, I don't have any news on it, but that is my thoughts on what they should do. I think it's very clear that if this chip were perfectly disabled into the right configuration, depending on if it made any sense yields wise, that's what they should do. And then I would just also say that, you know, the Z2 non-extreme should just be like the lowest yields binned correctly. Like I mean, I think if you just gave it 12 compute units or even just 8 compute units of an RDNA 3.5 with like 8 or 4 even Zen 5C cores, like that would be enough to be a huge uplift over the base Z1 non-extreme as well. Duh, 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 duh. All right, let me see what other questions we had here. Hope I didn't delete one of those. All righty, good. More Zen 5 questions. All right. So Francisco C writes in and says, with the shortfalls of Intel, do you worry that AMD will take this opportunity with X3D and price up the 9800 X3D to 399 and manipulate the CPU market? How is AMD manipulating the CPU market by trying to make a profit? Like that's not manipulating the CPU market just because they charge more because they're competition. You could say that's not very generous of AMD. I'm not saying it's good, but that's not market manipulation. That's them charging a price they think people will pay for it. But second of all, the 9800 X3D, yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be 399, right? I mean, I could see 499, like, but I've already leaked the pricing of Zen 5, and I'm doubling down on it. I mean, I think you're going to see these 8-core 9700X be somewhere between 329 and 379. I think 349 would be the right price, but we'll see what they do. And then I think you're going to see the 9800X 3D for 399 to 449. And I think they'll be able to demand that price because I think it's going to have the gaming crown over Intel, certainly before Arrow Lake launches by like, I mean, I don't know. I think they might take the gaming crown by like 30%. And once you do that, that's just nuts. They can charge 399 very easily for that. Now, your question, I think, really is what you want to ask is, do I think that because Intel's falling apart this week, that AMD is going to change their prices versus what I leaked like a month ago? Um, Not really. No, I think that if anything, this gives you more of a reason to double down, right? Because if you think about it, price wars are a war of attrition, right? It is, I'm betting I can outlast you with less profit. Well, if Intel's weak, that means AMD would win a war of attrition faster, and thus it would be less costly, and they should just go for it. So, no, I think Intel falling apart is, if anything, going to make AMD be more aggressive, except for maybe the very top end, because God knows people will just buy it if it's at the top end. That's the one place I don't know. But I still expect, generally speaking, the 9950X to be 599, 649 at most. And I think it's the 9950 X3D is the one that they're going to be like probably $800. Like I'm not sure of that obviously, but and I certainly would clap if it was just 650 or 700. But my suspicion would be that is the one where they milk because they just can. But it's probably not the one any of you are really interested in buying unless you have the money to spare anyway. So I don't see that as a huge deal there. And plus, I don't want to add this too. AMD is concerned Arrow Lake's going to beat them. Am I sure it will? No, but I think there's a solid chance here that Arrow Lake has a 10% lead in single threading and same or more in multi-threading. I'm not sure of that. I also think there's a chance they might lose single threading by like 10% and win multi-threading by only 5. That's also a possibility. But the fact that you're not sure if you're AMD, this isn't like Zen 3. When AMD launched Zen 3, they were sure they were going to win and they priced it accordingly. They're not sure. So you have two factors influencing AMD here. There's a bit of doubt that Arrow Lake may actually be more competitive than people realize. And then on top of that, they think this could be them taking the entire do-it-yourself market. So why not? So no, I think they're going to be pretty aggressively priced with most of Zen 5's models. Vito Marino writes in, thank you for the tip. With new discounted prices on new AMD CPUs and current Intel CPU problems, how much market share do you expect AMD to chew from Intel this year? I mean, I think they're going to take the whole do-it-yourself market, dude. I mean, what do you want me to say? This PR is so bad, and do-it-yourself buyers do pay attention to the news. I think AMD is going to clobber the do-it-yourself market, and I think they're going to take record laptop market. And they already are. Think about that. They're already taking record laptop market share, or at least should I say making record laptop revenue. Maybe not entirely market share. Just without even having Strix out. And with all of these problems, I mean, especially if there does start to become mass Raptor Lake laptop failures, yeah, AMD is going to take it. They're going to take a decent amount of laptop market share. Will they get to 50% by the end of next year? Honestly, at this point, it's hard for me to be optimistic about Intel at all, so I could see it, but I don't think they'll get there that fast. But I think we're watching the beginning this year of AMD's climb to 50% laptop market share by the end of the next 3 years, is what I would guess. What else is here? Okay, so I think I'm caught up on tipped questions. So let me keep rolling through these AMD Patreon questions. Which again, you join the Patreon, $4 a month. You can submit these questions, get things early. Anyways, Baez's Sammy Note 2 writes in and says, given that AMD now finds its cores occupying a server role without competition from Intel, did this contribute to the need for a higher standard QC checks than previously anticipated? That's an interesting point, right? That they share their chiplets between server and desktop. And so when they saw a validation issue, they were like, we absolutely have to delay everything because these are the same chiplets that will go into server. I don't know. Maybe that could be a factor. But I think there's a part of you. Oh, no. Maybe you're asking, is it because they want more yields for server instead of for desktop? No, I don't think so. I already put out that leak on Wednesday that talked about what was wrong with Zen 5. And why they delayed it. And the truth of the matter is, they're always updating validation and testing methods all the time. Like I've been told, it can happen week to week. Like this week, we added this new system, this new check. This week, we added this new way of stability testing. And apparently, whatever the latest update was, they caught a few CPUs that failed to validate at the clock speeds they wanted. And they went, well, if that were to happen, think about it. That would look a lot like the Intel instability problems. It's not the same. It's not degrading, but people would say, oh, is AMD suffering from the same issue? And so they're out of, and again, they kept saying this, an abundance of caution. They're not letting that happen. And that's it. I don't think there's another conspiracy here that we need to pay attention to. I don't think that there's some other 3D chess move AMD's playing here, a galaxy brain maneuver to launch after Intel has an update. I think that they had a new validation thing, catch a few things, and the very first batch of Zen 5 produced might need to have a few of them downbinned, and that's it. And if you think about that, that takes time. They're going to have to take weeks re-speccing or revalidating some chips. They're not worried about the ones that are being manufactured now. So That's that. Which actually, on that note, that reminds me, I think I forgot to, yeah, I forgot to do one of the leaks. So let me put this here. It's in the title. Um, it's Ryzen 9000 supply. And I'll probably do a proper full leak video about this in the coming weeks. But I will say that early here, what I'm hearing is that they're gonna have more of a trickle at launch compared to what they were planning. Now, I don't think it's time to hit the alarm and say paper launch or things are gonna be bad. I don't know that yet. It's early. It's not like I've talked to a dozen sources on this one, just a couple, but it is starting to sound like Ryzen 9000's desktop launch. Like there's a reason it's a staggered launch. They're validating the low end ones first, then the high end ones are going to take more time because those are the more likely to have the validation issue. And so I think for the first few weeks of Zen 5's launch, there will be product. It won't be a paper launch, but it's going to be like every few days more stock shows up and it'll be like a trickle. And then I am sure by September it's going to be a tsunami of parts, though. Just to be clear, a tsunami. They're still producing a ton of them. They still made a ton of them. They just need to be rebinned. There's going to be a ton of Zen 5 by September, I think. But I do think the first few weeks it's going to be a bit of a trickle. So I just wanted to leak that here today in this video. Um, Mexi Man and Cheese writes in and says, "So I heard that Jensen and Lisa Sue were cousins. Are they, or is it like uncle or like something? Do you know if they have a third to replace Pat Gelsinger?" I don't know. I don't know, man. Funny joke. Chris Rick writes in and he says, "Any updates on sales of the X Elite and Strix Point? Any idea how OEMs and retailers feel about them relative to Meteor Lake?" Yeah, I mean, I've already leaked in the last Broken Silicon, I believe, with Dan, that early sales for Strix are gangbusters. Like I've been told that it's on very, very, very well. As for X Elite, it's a trickle. So is X Elite a complete dead on arrival failure? No, I would not characterize it that way. But I would say that they have not met expectations. And there's a reason that they're going to do, well, what I was saying over and over they need to do. X Elite products need to be $700. If you could give somebody Hawk Point CPU performance and Strix battery life and a modern AI engine, not a great GPU, but that's the one thing you're sacrificing for $700. So they're like, wait, I get a 16-hour battery life and a $700 product. That's what people would pay for, but nobody's going to pay $1,500 for it because the performance just isn't there overall, and there's just too many issues to worry about. So I think what we're going to see is what we are seeing is X Elite sales. They're there, but they're not good. It's not done arrival though, and then I think they will pick up if they can really work on that software and get cheaper models out before Christmas. I think that's going to eat into Intel's sales a lot. Beefish writes in, he says, Strix looks interesting, but in Fox initial testing of the iGPU, I didn't see the scale with additional wattage at a certain point. Yeah. So I've already talked about that. Given the lack of apps and general state of AI, how well do you think Strix will perform replacing the MPU with a block of Infinity Cache? Oh, so you're basically asking if instead of having 16 millimeters squared for the 50 or 55 tops NPU, what if they would have given it Infinity Cache? Look, they need the MPU for marketing. I'm just being honest, being frank. They do. Like, and it's a smart move to have the best MPU right now, even if most consumers don't care. Think about this too. It's like an opportunity risk. Like, what if AI doesn't take off and these NPUs are useless? Okay, but you're still only wasting less than 10% of the die to add this NPU. All right, what if AI takes off and then Strix is useless in a year? That's a huge problem. I mean, think about it. Like the fact that they have this NPU in Strix now means if they rebrand it or it have like I think I saw something called Bald Eagle Point on some rumor site. I don't know if it's true. Like if they have an iteration of Strix, they already designed the NPU and it's ready for the apps of the future. And they could even copy and paste it maybe into like Escher, which is coming out next year as well, which is a budget APU. Like putting in the work now, making sure your market share has this capability now is worth it. So Bfish, it would be a bad idea to remove the MPU. Second thing about Strix's performance, it's obviously bandwidth limited, but people don't just use the GPU for gaming. And to be honest, if you're at like what was it? If you're at like 28 watts, I believe it was, the 880M and 890M are only like 10 to 5 to 15% away from each other in performance because they're bandwidth bottlenecked at that point. Right. But at the same time, that 16 compute unit one's probably better at editing, right? And so I would still probably want the 16 compute unit model for work. And AMD probably thought about that it's not just about gaming performance, which it's there. They got to the gaming performance you need for real 1080p gaming on an APU with reasonable settings, even 1440p or and easier to run games, which is just incredible. But they probably gave it a bit more teraflops than it needed because I think it has like 12 teraflops if it's dual issue or something. And you can just go, yeah, this has the teraflops of an Xbox Series X. Like you can use this to edit. You don't need a dedicated graphics card. So that's another reason they would have made it have 16 compute units. I don't think that was a mistake. The one thing I'll say, the one thing I'll say about Strix is I don't think it needed 10 cores. Like I genuinely think it probably should have just been 2 P cores. Well, they're all P cores, but it should have just been 2 big cores and 10 and 8 compact cores. I think it's very clear that it needs a lot of power to power the CPU for high multi-threading performance, but it's more power than a lot of laptops are going to give it. But then also the GPU doesn't need more power. So it's kind of a lopsided thing there. I think what they should have done is they should have removed a couple of the cores on Strix. I think they still should have gone to 10, so still have 10 cores, but they should have removed a couple of the cores and then even made the die slightly bigger. So you remove 2 cores, what are you really removing? Like 10 millimeters squared? Right. So make it 6, then add 6, make it like a 240 millimeter squared APU, and then add 16 megabytes of infinity cache. That is the Galaxy Brain move I would argue they should have done. The GPU is big for professional uses, and there's legitimate uses for 12 teraflops outside of gaming, and they need the NPU for multiple reasons for future proofing. They didn't really seem to need 12 cores, though, did they? It kind of seems capped. Like it didn't need that many cores. So I think they should have removed 2 of those. And even if they had to make the die slightly bigger, just slightly, they could have fit it on the same sockets. Yeah, they should have given it infinity cache. I think 16 megabytes would have I mean, it probably would have made this thing how would it have performed? I mean, not like a 6600, but certainly like maybe a desktop 3050 or close, and that would have been even crazier. So, yeah. At the end of the day, though, Strix just wins integrated graphics, though. So there's also the argument that they're like, well, we don't need to do more because the competition can't match us anyways. But yeah, I don't know. Those are my thoughts on Strix there. Let me see. That's Strix configuration. All right, let me see. I think we had some more tipped questions here. Did we not? Yes, we did. So we have real question. Skip you already discussed. Do you know it's from X-Man and Cheese again? Do you know when we can expect to see Strix Point in handhelds? Yeah, I know people have been asking me about this. I think every live stream and Broken Silicon. I'm like, where like the first question I answered was about the Z2 Extreme. Everyone wants to know when will we get Strix handhelds? Because this thing's going to be crazy great in handhelds, clearly. Um, I I would be surprised if there wasn't a Strix handheld by the end of the year. But and this is a spiel I gave last loose ends, I believe. The reason we're seeing so many Hawk Point handhelds and Hawk Point tablets from smaller companies like Minis Forum, it's again, I love that tablet, is because AMD had all the capacity ready and OEMs weren't buying as much as they're buying of Strix, right? So AMD had a lot of extra Hawk Point stock to which all of the little smaller OEMs like Minis Forum and Mini PC and handheld companies went gobble, 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 gobble. GPD just goes gobble, gobble, give me that Hawk Point. They're trying to gobble right now with Strix, but the OEMs are eating it up. So it's hard for me to see there being a lot of Strix handhelds before the end of the year, just because, especially with all these Intel issues, you got to know HP and Lenovo and Asus at a minimum are going, give us as much Strix as you can to AMD. And if you give us good contracts with a lot of it, you know what? We'll sign up for Strix Halo and Medusa as well. I mean, there's already a leak coming out about Asus making a Strix Halo tablet. That looks awesome. So it's going to be hard for the smaller companies, which let's be honest, the handhelds are from smaller companies, to get anything out with Strix while the OEMs are buying it all up. What that does mean, though, is that I could totally see an Asus Strix handheld before the end of the year, though. I could. At a minimum, I'd expect them to tease it, but yeah, I don't know about GPD. That one's going to be a hard one. They all just launched their Hawk Point handhelds, so those are probably coming next year if I had to guess. Let's see here. Let's move on to some GPU questions. How about it? All right, let me put down a new timestamp. Again, remember, double check that you're subscribed to Moore's Law is dead. Almost half of you aren't subscribed, and also like the video, please. We have, wow, almost over 1,300 people watching live. Let's get to 1,300 likes. Right, RDNA 4, and my brain just completely died. Blackwell. Okay. Spencer Walker writes in, thank you for the tip. It says RDNA 4 will have a 256-bit bus. Yes. But how big is that for performance on handhelds? I see that RDNA 3.5 still has a 128-bit bus. Well, for Strix Point, but Strix Halo has a 256-bit bus. So yeah, I think he'll be fine. With 40 compute units and 256-bit. Although now that I think about it, if 128-bit holds back 16 compute units, 32. Well, no, yeah, but they're gonna have 32 megabytes of infinity cache with Strix Halo. So yeah, I expect Strix Halo then. If you really think about how constrained by bandwidth Strix Point is, I bet Strix Halo is maybe 3-4 times the performance, actually. Which, let's do this for fun here. What would I say? Let's say it's a 1660. All right. Let us see what performance that would mean for Strix Halo if I go check power up here quickly. Like, da. So yeah, I think that probably 3. Nah, it can't be that strong. I think I might put my foot in my mouth there. But yeah, I expect over double. I don't know. That would suggest can't be 3080 performance though, right? No, that'd be insane. I don't know. It'll be a lot stronger. I don't want to say something that sounds incredibly stupid, but I think 256-bit. And also, Strix Halo has faster memory. If I remember correctly, it's going up to like 8,500 LPDDR5X. So you're going to be giving. So think about the math on this. Yes, Strix Halo has 40 compute units instead of 16. So that's what, 2.5 times the compute units? 1632. That's how math works. Yes. 2.5 times the compute units. But then it also has double the memory bus. So that's 2 times an 8,500 divided by 7,200. That'd be 500. Right. So it's going to get 2.3 times the bandwidth and infinity cache on top of it. Yeah, I think it'll easily scale up pretty linearly with CUs at least. And I wouldn't worry about if they use Strix Halo for Strix Halo LP, the 128-bit version for handhelds as well, as long as it has some infinity cache. I think you give it that 16 megabytes and 20 CUs will be fine. All right, so here's another Strix question. Mr. W writes in and says, do you think Strix Halo mini PCs will be priced fairly? Dude, what's your definition of priced fairly? Because some people think it's $2,000 and some people think it's $20. Do I think they will be priced fairly? I'm not going to answer the question the way you asked it. I'm going to say, where do I think it would be a sensible place to price it? I mean, you're basically getting, well, what would this be? This would probably be stronger than like this could be like 6700 XT performance potentially. Maybe, like, so what does that sell for right now? Yeah, I mean, you're basically getting a PS5 or better in a tablet. That's just awesome. So 6700 XT, I think I should actually search 6750, right? Isn't that the one that's actually still selling? That's like $300, and I've seen used 3060s go for like 200. I guess that's used though, so I don't know if that's really fair. Yeah, okay. There's 6700 XTs going for like 275 right now, or 280, really. So if you think about it, you're getting a $280 graphics card, except it does better ray tracing probably and has better AI capabilities than all of these older cards that are being sold in this price range right now. You also pretty much get unlimited VRAM. Strix Halo seems like it's going to be shipping with just 32 or 64 gigabytes. They're not giving you crap variants, it doesn't look like, which means that, yeah, I mean, you could configure you could give it plenty. Plenty of VRAM. That's an advantage over these cheaper graphics cards most of the time too. So I would call that really like a $350, $400 graphics card. If it comes with a 16 core, I mean, dude, if it's 16 Zen 5, and it is, I believe, that's a $600 processor with like a $400 graphics card. So, I mean, maybe $300 graphics card anyway. But, and then if you get an entire system, I think that's gonna just be like a $1,500 mini PC. I don't know what to tell you guys. I mean, let me do the math. Like, let's say $300 GPU, $600 CPU, and then let's pretend if this was a desktop, you'd have to buy a motherboard, so 150, 32 gigs RAM, so just do $100 worth of RAM, depending on what you want. This for the SSD that comes with it, and then yeah, I think they're gonna. I think they're gonna be $1,200 to $1,500 because that is the price it would be just to build the desktop with separate components. And if you say that's not fair, well, I don't know what to say. I mean, this is a cutting edge, M4 like Apple Ultra competitor, so it's not cheap because it is actually quite advanced and uses a lot of silicon. Um, Let me continue here. All right, let me finish these GPU questions too. So, Alias Anonymous writes in, probably just give this its own timestamp, since I rambled on for a while there, huh? Aliasing Anonymous writes in and says, any additional info on Blackwell performance leaks? Like, is it 48% stronger? I saw someone say that. I'm definitely not a leaker, but I spoke with an NVIDIA source whom I know, who's really tight-lipped usually, and he admitted that 48% uplift is roughly on point. Yeah, I have nothing to change about what I expect out of uh, battle back my brain today. Blackwell performance. I mean, I expect 40 to 80% with the emphasis on it being more like 45 to 60%. But I can't give you a tighter number than that because it just depends on how Nvidia configures it, right? Remember, the 4090 is cut down more than 10%. So, were they to launch some Titan or 5090 Ti with all of the SMs enabled and the fastest GDDR7 on the market that comes out next year, like just what 32 gigabit per second or higher? I mean, you could see a situation where this thing has over double the bandwidth and like an absurd amount of teraflops at 3 gigahertz. If they really push this thing to the limit because the 4090 is cut down, yeah, it could be 60, 70% stronger. I don't think they're going to quite do that though. So I stand by what I say of like really 40 to 60%. So I don't know where, you heard that and asked the NVIDIA person, but that's pretty much the target I've been saying the whole time. Whether it's 48 or 55%, though, that is up to NVIDIA, and they probably still haven't decided. So, um, or I think they did decide, but now it's not coming. It's delayed. So who knows if they're changing their mind. All righty. Let us now pivot back to Intel's issues here. How about it? Da-da-da-da-da. Put down a timestamp. All right. Dave Schultz writes in and says about Battlemage, do you think it would be wise for Intel to release a desktop variant that has an okay performance with tons of VRAM for a good price? What's the amount of VRAM at which price where it would be interesting? Like, imagine a $700 card with 48 gigabytes. It could be perfect for intense video editing, large scene rendering, and AI training. I think Intel would have to do that to get frickin' anyone to buy it, honestly. And some people probably would. I still think the overwhelming majority wouldn't buy it because they just don't trust Intel's drivers for professional tasks, but undoubtedly some people would choose that. But yeah, I mean, I think that's what they would have to do. Although I will say Intel's like looking almost bankrupt like right now, and if they launch a giant expensive product that no one buys, that's a bad business decision, and they just shouldn't do that. Like the pipe dream's got to stop, Pat. Don't launch products no one will buy. Like Chris Rich writes and it says Intel's about to take an axe to R&D. What do you think will happen to Arc? I doubt they'll officially announce its demise anytime soon, as that would undermine Lunar Lake and Panther Lake. Yeah, I'm gonna keep saying what have been saying earlier in this video and have said in a million other videos as well. Arc is effectively canceled. It's been effectively canceled forever. Where's Battlemage? We're in August of 24. They had a roadmap showing Battlemage should be launching in 2023, and yet they remain quiet about it. It's because it's effectively canceled. I think they're going to do some limited edition launch in December that is like no OEM or AIB support outside of like BioStar or something. And then that's going to be the last fart that ends Arc. That is honestly my opinion. And if they think that is going to cost them a ton of money, I think they would be wise to do the other thing I thought they might do, which is pretend Lunar Lake counts as dedicated because it's its own tile. No, it is a dedicated graphics card. Look, it's dedicated. See, like they could argue Lunar Lake is, and that's it. At a minimum, whatever they do with a desktop battle mage, they better not waste a lot of money on it, and it better just be to keep the company's graphics division on life support so their drivers don't get worse. But I don't even know if they can afford to do that anymore. So yeah, there's no way there's not going to be a lot of and I already heard that they fired like half the people on the ARC team like a year ago or half a year ago. I don't know at this point when it was. So I can only imagine how many are going away now, and it's kind of turning into a skeleton crew over there. All right, and Intel's problems. So Joda Neo writes in, thank you for the tip. And he says, do you think Intel needs to blow Pat out of the wafer? I will say, I'll ask this question too. Alex Smith writes in and he says, hi, Tom. With Intel announcing layoffs 3 years in a row now, what's the sentiment like inside the company? Horribly bad. Well, Nvidia is going to be dealing with the issues of its managers becoming millionaires, which is a real problem, by the way. Intel stock has, as of writing, an all-time high plummeted to an 11-year low. Surely the writing is on the wall for Pat. Another write-in here from Intel Fanboy says, do you think Pat will keep the job for much longer after Intel's disastrous results? I would suspect that Pat's going to be around, obviously, through Arrow Lake, which comes out end of this year. I think they're going to stick around for Granite Rapids and maybe give him Diamond Rapids, which I think he was trying to pull up to launch late next year. It's supposed to launch 26 pointed up to 2025 is what I heard. I don't know if that's public information. I forget at this point. But I would say if Diamond Rapids is looking bad, and if Battle Mage does have some big launch that face plants again, investors are going to ask questions, and I think that will be it for him. But I suspect they'll give him one more year. But if it's another bad year, I think he's gone. I mean, I don't know what else to say. Is it his fault or not? Like, is there no way? Like, he's just driving the car as best he can. No one else would have done a better job. I don't know. But at the end of the day, you give someone like, was it 3 or 5 years or something here? I don't know how long he's been there, and it only goes worse on paper. At least especially the people that don't think about this as much, like they're analysts that analyze 100 different stocks. An analyst is going to go, look, you've been here for 5 years and things have only got worse. We need someone else. So we'll see. And I think the one legitimate thing you can say is that Alchemist was just such a failure and a waste of money. I don't know. James Geiger writes in and says, bring back Bob Swan to Intel. Now, wasn't that the one that everyone called a beam counter? Let me see. Yes, but I actually kind of liked Bob Swan. He had the thankless job of trying to keep the ship together while everything was melting down, So I don't know. I don't know about Bob Swan, but they'll have to pick someone. Let me save this question here. We'll get back to it in a second. Let's just get through the rest of the Intel questions. Let me make sure. Did anyone else ask one of those here as well? Games Lord writes in and says 12,700K, 13,600K, and 14,500. Are they healthy? With an answer is we'll never know for sure, at least for the next year, right? I mean, right now it seems like the i5s are fine, and that the 13th gen i7 is fine, but that's for now. What we know is that the ones with the most cores and the highest voltages at Intel are breaking first. We have no proof that long-term the i5 won't break just years after the i9s did. Now, I think it's unlikely they will, though, because I do hear the mitigation should work decently well enough to stop the i9s from breaking after a couple of years. I don't know, but it sounded funny. To protect the i5s, I think they're probably fine. The i7 is on the borderline, but considering Alder Lake is running fine, it's probably okay. I'd say the i5 is almost certainly okay. The i7 is probably okay. And anything lower than that in the product stack, they should be fine, I think. All right, so let me get to the rest of these Intel questions. Sakosha writes in and says, Intel has reported huge layoffs and catastrophic financial results today, but there was no mention of the Raptor Lake instability issue. For some reason, this news has not yet reached corporate media. How long do you think they'll succeed in hiding it from the board and shareholders? Not much longer. It's actually a miracle that it didn't come up this time much. Look, the lawsuits are going to be coming. They're going to be coming hard. And I think next quarter is when that's going to be a huge discussion point at their earnings calls. Now, the funny thing is, again, I talked to an analyst today about this, and the person told me that, like, keep in mind that even though these Raptor Lake issues are a big deal, as long as their server chips are working, we're actually more concerned about Intel's fabs being underutilized and them losing server market share. So believe it or not, for any other company, this would be the only thing we're talking about. But maybe we do know about it, and it's just the third worst thing going on actually. So consider that, Sakosha. But yes, I do think that's worth thinking about here, though, is that client is Intel's last big profitable uh, wing of the company right now. And client is the one who will be hit by these Raptor Lake issues. And those still aren't turning up in earnings calls. So if their earnings are this bad, if their prices crash this much, I don't know why we'd think they've bottomed. This is going to make it probably crater even more. So then maybe it'll bottom. We'll see. But again, not financial advice, but this is only entertainment. But, that's what I would be thinking about, Sakosha. Multinatty writes in and says, do you think the oxidation issue on Raptor Lake will impact the Intel Foundry business in the future? Intel recently posted on Reddit saying that the issue was identified in late 2022. That person's wrong. I can't say how I double know now. It had, I mean, there was an oxidation issue that went into early 2023. So that's just not true. It seems scummy to me that it took this long for them to disclose it. And I'm a potential Foundry customer. I'd be looking at TSMC more. Yeah, that's the thing. And I might have a short come out about this over the next weekend or over this weekend. But one thing that I would say is the Raptor Lake ring bus failures are a monetary issue, a material issue for Intel. That's going to cost them a lot of money with RMAs. The oxidation issue isn't. They fixed it. It's done. This is not a thing you really should be worrying about that much with your CPU. If it was just this, it wouldn't be a huge deal monetarily, immediately. It's a legal issue, though, because it seems like they didn't disclose something to their partners that they should have. And even if they win the lawsuit, like, oh, technically we didn't need to disclose this or we didn't need to do that. I mean, it still makes IFS look horrible, right? It still makes you go, why would we go with Intel? Especially when you consider that it's not just Intel that's probably built too many foundries. TSMC has as well, from what I'm hearing. And so, yeah, TSMC has more foundries than they might need. Great. That's extra capacity people can go to instead of Intel. So it's just a double whammy there. No matter how you dice it, that oxidation issue is going to make me curious if anyone's going to go with them. The only way they would is if it's basically given to them for free, which is what I heard. Remember, I leaked that Intel was bidding to make the next Xbox, and that they basically offered in Microsoft the wafers for cost or something, that they saw it as a marketing opportunity. And that's what, if Nvidia, by the way, makes stuff on Intel's foundries, you're gonna have to do the same thing. So let's see here. Yeah. Sakosha writes in again and says, another question is, if Intel is seriously considering splitting its foundry, they have made a number of steps towards that goal over the last few years. So maybe it's just a matter of when, not if. Maybe. I mean, Jim Keller thought they should have. Most people I talk to behind the scenes thinks that's the only way Intel can get the money to save themselves, is like selling off their foundries, or not all of them maybe, but at least like a lot of them that they don't need anymore. And therefore also that would cut a lot of jobs that they don't need to pay anymore. But who's going to buy their foundry and the employees that work there? I mean, the only one that comes to mind is like Tesla, maybe Apple, but no, they're in with TSMC, not Apple. Only ones that come to mind are like Tesla or a car company, or, I mean, would Samsung want it to have more manufacturing in the United States? I don't know. Samsung already has plants around Arizona. Actually heard they're poaching a lot of jobs from the Intel plants down there right now. Maybe Samsung would take over that fab. I guess that's all I could think of, is if Intel was so desperate, like they sold it to Samsung in Arizona or something like that. But I don't think most people, but I think most foundries that they're competing with have enough capacity right now. So I don't know if they'd really want to unless it was a bargain. So it's just hard for me to see who would really buy it. Yeah, I don't know. Woody Chang writes in, says, hi, Tom. Assuming that Arrow Lake, let's put down a timestamp for this here. We've been rambling for a while about Intel. Arrow Lake expectations. Woody Chang writes in, he says, hi, Tom. Assuming that Arrow Lake isn't some Zen 2 moment for Intel, how many generations of just executing will Intel need to do before the public starts to trust them again? Right now, it might seem like never, unless there's a change up or up top or some major public reassurance that the Raptor Lake situation will be made right. I mean, so yeah, the question is, we were hoping, and we had all these leaks, some of them for me, that Arrow Lake was going to be a game changer and Nova Lake was going to be a game changer, and that Beast Lake was going to be like the highest single threading you've ever dreamed of. And now I'm leaking today that Beast Lake is canceled, that the Royal Core project's kind of falling apart. I still hear that Panther Lake has like a 3 to 8% maybe. Could be a little more than that. Probably not though. IPC increase, like a solid IPC increase with Panther Lake. So you're basically asking, all right, if Intel doesn't have one of those 20 to 30% IPC Zen 3 moments anytime soon, but all they do is give us like another 5 to 15% IPC every generation, which, not like Ivy Bridge to Haswell, but a little better than that. But that's it. And that's all they do every 2 years. Like, how long would they have to do that before people would consider them again? I don't know. I'd say at least 2 years. Maybe one though, but like a rough 1 year. Like I just think people are going to be really apprehensive to buy Arrow Lake, and as long as AMD's within 5% of their performance, maybe even within 10%, people are just going to ignore Intel for a year or two if that's all they do. If it's not like a huge upgrade, that is my opinion. Because even if AMD was like 10% behind Intel, everyone's going to go whatever. I trust them; they're reliable. And you know what else? They're charging like $600 and Intel's charging $700. So it's 10% weaker for 15% less. And I have peace of mind. I'll buy AMD. And I think unless Intel does manage to surprise us with some Arrow Lake IPC increase that's unexpected, or Panther Lake kills it at like 10, 15%, and Nova Lake's like a 20%, 30% uplift, unless they can manage those things, I think it'll be 2 years of people going, who cares? Um, Mark Smith writes in and says, "Is Alder Lake safe to buy and use?" I think so. I've heard no. If and Alder Lake came out in 2021. Man, it's 2024. It's been almost 3 years. There's no evidence Alder Lake's failing anything. So I think Alder Lake's safe. Yeah, I do. KJM015 writes in and says, "What happens if Intel Arrow Lake flops? Does the company have the capital to be able to weather through a generation of weak sales following these Raptor Lake failures? Or is Arrow Lake really going to be their last hope for redemption?" I mean, here's a scary thought. What if Arrow Lake's doomed to flop because of these instability problems? I mean, that's the thing I'm concerned about for Intel right now, is that it almost doesn't matter what they do if people just don't trust them. So I don't know. Not really. I don't think easily. I guess if Arrow Lake was a home run, they'd lose market share to Zen 5 still. I'm still confident they're going to lose market share to Zen 5. But maybe they could stop the bleeding so that they don't lose the whole do-it-yourself market. Like, Arrow Lake comes out, and sure, it comes out 4 years, like 3 months after Zen 5, but it wins by 20% or something, even if it's expensive. Yeah, I think what would happen is they'd still hold some of the do-it-yourself market. But that's what it would take. And I still think it'd be some. I don't think they're going to dominate it, man. I just think the damage is done here. And what we got to be hoping for is that Arrow Lake is good enough to not lose the entire do-it-yourself market, but they're already going to lose most of it, I'm sure. TMC Payton writes in and says, "In Broken Silicon 266, in the wrap-up section, you suggested that Arrow Lake overclockable i5s will be 350 or probably 400. Would you bet money that an i5 15600K, well, won't it be called like an Ultra 5 240? Who knows what the fuck they're doing with the naming? Like, I don't know. It'll be called a Core Ultra, of course. Do you think it would be above 350? I can't bet anything because I don't know if Intel will be so desperate that they just price it lower anyways. So no, I'm not going to bet, but my guess is 350, to be honest with you. I mean, they'll have 14 cores. 8 of those cores will be as strong as, well, they won't be as strong as Raptor Lake. I think there's a misconception here about Skymont and Raptor Lake. People are like, oh, Skymont's as strong as Raptor Lake. No, it's not. It just has similar IPC. Raptor Lake is clocked 20% faster. That's the difference between Zen 4 and Zen 5 performance. So it's weaker than Raptor Lake. It is weaker than Zen 4 cores, people. Skymon. It's just a similar IPC, not the same clocks. And it remains to be seen if that IPC carries over into games and all these other apps, not just Cinebench, right? So I think, though, you'll still be able to argue that you have these 8, Raptor Lake-ish cores and these 6, maybe slightly better than Zen 5 cores, but then they don't have hyper-threading. So that's 14 threads versus 8 threads at the 9700X. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it would win multi-threading. So I think that they're going to try to charge 350 for it. Yeah, I do. And I think you have to remember it costs more to make than Zen 5. So they have to. They have to charge more. Or they'll go out of business even quicker. TMC Paint writes in and says, "Where do you expect Meteor Lake refresh efficiency to land?" What would it take for you to recommend it? Yeah, I went through a roller coaster of opinions when I was told by a couple sources here about Meteor Lake Refresh. At first, I was like, "Are you got to be kidding me? Really? They're rebranding Meteor Lake and they're going to call it Arrow Lake?" And I think they might do that with a couple of the models, to be honest. Just like they did with Alder Lake to Raptor Lake, by the way. They rebranded some Alder Lake Silicon and called it Raptor Lake. There's your snake oil. Um, but I also have been told that there's this it's really not a Meteor Lake refresh. I mean, you can call it that, but it's really Meteor Lake Plus. Like they're moving the E cores in between P cores, I heard, for latency reasons. So there's better communication there and better efficiency. And it's expected, I believe, if I remember correctly, it was like 15% higher performance at same clocks or 20% lower power consumption at same performance. So that's like a 15-20% boost. Man, that sounds like as good as Phoenix to Hawkpoint to me, and I was really impressed with Hawkpoint, surprisingly so. I didn't think Hawkpoint would be more than a 5 to 10% uplift, but it was actually like 20% more efficient. It was really impressive. This seems at least as good as that. So, if putting it on, they're shrinking it from Intel 4 to Intel 3 for the compute tile, rearranging the tile a bit. If this allows them to make a cheaper, you know, Escher competitor or Kraken competitor, I actually am not so sure it'll be bad. I mean, think about it. Escher is going to be the budget AMD APU. It's going to basically be like Hawkpoint Plus, so probably 10-15% better at best. Meteor Lake Refresh to me sounds competitive with that. And if they can get that into sub $1,000 laptops, I actually oddly think that could do pretty well. But that is what it would have to be. It's basically fixed Meteor Lake with some updates to the core topography. Uh, and I think that's all it would really take to be competitive with AMD's sub $1,000 APU. So I actually am not that negative about it. I am negative though if they literally rebrand some Meteor Lake dies, which I've heard they will, and pretend it's Alder Lake. If they do that, that's just stupid. But anyways, Nicholas Maynard writes in and says, I find it sad that the 9950 X3D still won't have extra cache on both CCDs. I guess I'll pick the 9950, so I have to deal with that damn game bar. I mean, has that actually literally been confirmed yet? Like, did something else come out about that today? No, all we have is something from WCCF Tech, and they said it was going to cost $500 for the 9950X, and that's been proven wrong. So I'm not saying they will use Vcache on both CCDs, but I wouldn't take anything to the bank yet. I'd also say this: if they do just put Vcache on one of the CCDs, I would expect that they did something to make it work better than the Xbox game bar, my dude. So, the reason you would get the 9950X is simply because it's going to be cheaper. And can we be honest here? It's going to probably trade blows with the 7800 X3D in performance. Over time, I think it's going to surpass it. Look up what happened. Go look at the recent 14900K review on TechSpot. You'll see that the 5800 X3D is now behind the 9700X. I believe the 9600X in 1080p gaming. That's because over time, the Zen 4 architecture aged better because it was newer, better instruction support for newer instruction sets. Same thing's going to happen, I think, with Zen 5. I think at launch, you're going to see the 9950X beat the 7800X3D by like 2%. And then the 7800X3D will be 5 to 10% faster than the 9700X when the 9700X has PBO turned on. It'll probably be a little stronger than that when it's turned off. But then I think over time, the 9700X is going to take the lead over the 7800X 3D. And so from that perspective, that I think over time, the 9950X will end up about 10% faster than the 7800X 3D. What do you use this for? Do you use it for work? Is something 10% stronger than the 7800X 3D not good enough for gaming? At what frame rate are you playing at, my dude? That's what I think about it. I continue to think that the 8 core with Vcache is for gamers. The 16 core is still plenty good at gaming. Take it from me. I'm using the Zen 4 16 core right now, and it's actually the 7945HX in this mini PC, meaning it runs at 5.4 gigahertz, not 5.7. I am not CPU bottlenecked in any game. I can't imagine adding like 20% to that and complaining. So if I don't know if there's a special app you would want it for, but I continue to think that if they don't put Vcache in both of them, that you probably just want 16 cores without Vcache if you're a professional. If you're a gamer, you just want the 8 core. Oh, boy, lots of tipped questions here. All right. Analog dopamine writes in and says Strix core to core latency, Zen 5 to Zen 5C, is around 180 nanoseconds according to AnandTech. This is more than twice the E core latency. Will it get fixed with Halo? Well, Halo doesn't have E cores, so the answer is yes. Yeah, that's the answer. Ria New WW writes in and says, "Hi Tom, I just want to ask: is the 13th and 14th then issue affecting Xeon series as well? Sorry, I'm not that informed in technology." No, you're good. So the oxidation issue, right? Which should have been a red flag the second that everyone heard about oxidation, that it wasn't just Raptor Lake, right? Intel doesn't just have a plant where all they're making is Raptor Lake. They're also making Sapphire Rapids in the same foundries. And so I was told that some Sapphire Rapids was affected by oxidation. But then that means no, I don't think the Xeon series is affected anymore because they moved to Redwood Cove with Meteor Lake and Redwood Cove Plus with Granite Rapids, and those are just new architectures. So no, they're not affected by it, to my knowledge. And anything after Raptor Lake should be fine, from what I'm hearing. Arrow Lake, we'll have to double check on, I'd say, but I'm told pretty firmly the current Xeons in Meteor Lake are fine. Will IFS be a good option for Nvidia? Well, remember, the rumor circulating that's actually been circulating for a while is they're just going to use Intel's packaging to make H100. They're not actually making anything on Intel wafers. So yeah, why not? If Nvidia can get a good deal, do it. Like alleviate that bottleneck a little bit. Spencer Walker 21 writes and it says, "Can AMD shoehorn an RDNA 4 GPU onto an older Zen 4, but all 16 cores for a Steam Deck 2? I don't think the CPU will be bottleneck on like Zen 2 was." Well, why would they do that? Zen 5 cores are, well, a Zen 5 CCD, it's not actually the cores, a Zen 5 CCD is smaller than a Zen 4 CCD. Were you to make the perfect handheld, I think it should be 8 or maybe even 6 Zen 5C cores, and that's it. As long as they can run to like at least 3 gigahertz, that's enough for a handheld. I think 6 or 8 Zen 5C cores. And then, yeah, I'd want, what is it going to be? And then I'd want probably at least 24 RDNA 4 compute units. But if they could shove 32 in there, that'd be really cool. Because let me think, they'd be going down how many nodes? 1, 2. Trying to think of it, probably put it on 3 nanometer. Yeah, they probably could fit that. Then, yeah. So that's what I would be advocating for is 6 to 8 Zen 5C cores and 1 unified CCD, CCX, I guess you'd say actually. And then just 24 to 32 RDNA 4 compute units. Brett Birdman writes, and it says, "What are the odds that the 5080 and 5090 release this year?" I think more likely than not. I just think it's going to be like a paper launch at the end of the year. Although I want to be honest, I do keep hearing about the mobile launches getting pushed back. I still haven't done that leak just because there's so much more important stuff to talk about right now than like when mobile Blackwell comes out next year. But so I guess I can't say I'm 100% sure, but I think more likely than not, you're going to see these late Q4, which is what I believe I've been leaking. And remember how important this is. I was, I believe, the only channel here, people. Let me actually put a timestamp for this because I think this is something a lot of people are probably interested in. Blackwell this year. I think, when all those rumors came out of the 5080 launching before the 5090, a lot of people rejoiced and said, "Oh, great, that must mean that it's coming out super soon because the 5090 is supposed to come out Q3." And I confirmed the 5080 is supposed to come out this year. But then I also doubled up with my other sources and were like, "Well, what do you know about it?" And they said nothing. I think I was the only channel to say, "Guys, the 5080 launching before the 5090 is not a acceleration of the launch. That's a delay of the 5090 because the 5080 wasn't ready." The second you saw the 5080 is coming out before the 5090 and AIBs know nothing about the 5080 should tell you, "Oh no, that means both of these are coming out Q4 probably." So do I think they're going to come out this year? I think so. I think so. But I don't think I'm not willing to bet my life on it. And I certainly don't think we're going to see it like next month or something. Millennius Computing writes in, continuing with the Intel questioning. It says, "Me and people I casually chat with have been wondering if Alder Lake or other LGA 1851 socket architectures might have the Raptor Lake ring bus flaw? Would you be skeptical, or is it possible? The reason there was this ring bus flaw is because they pushed the voltage too hard and they pushed too many cores onto this ring bus at a high voltage, and it cooks the ring bus. Arrow Lake removes hyperthreading. I don't think Arrow Lake's going to be pushed to as high voltages, or at least as hard, is a good way to put it. And Arrow Lake will have more validation under it, I think, than Raptor Lake, which is rushed out. So, is it possible? Anything's possible, man. I don't think you need to worry about Meteor Lake or Lunar Lake, but 8 plus 16 again, if they pushed it really hard, I don't know. I can't say it's a 0% chance, but I don't think it has it. So I wouldn't take this to mean I think it has it. I don't think it has the problem. I think it's very unlikely it does, but I can't say 100% until it proves themselves, really. If the PS6 in 2028, okay, were to be the equivalent, this is Games Lord here, which I guess we can pivot to some console questions at this point. Games Lord says, if the PlayStation 6 in 2028 or whenever it comes out, right? Well, no, I guess it doesn't matter what year it comes out because equals the 7800 X3D plus the 7900 XTX, would you be satisfied? My answer might be no. Let me look here. The PS4 had, what was it, 18 compute units, and then it went to 36 with way higher clocks. So that's double the compute units. I would want the PS6 at a minimum, just speaking out loud here, to be 72 compute units at like 2.5 gigahertz or something. And in terms of CPU, it doesn't matter, like 2028. So what? Zen 6 has been out for at least 2 years, maybe 3. I mean, the Zen 7 will be out. No, I wouldn't be satisfied. Suck it. I wouldn't. I think people need to understand that these things are a moving target. You can't say right now it would be. There's no way the PlayStation 6 has a 7900 XTX. Everyone said the same crap about the PS5 and Xbox Series X. Lo and behold, it had the graphics performance I told you it would. It had Zen 2 and it had an SSD. That's because it's in the future. 4 years from now, my dude? Nah. I would want it to have a truly custom CCX design, like probably 12 Zen 6 or Zen 7 cores unified, running at like 5 gigahertz, at least 4. They might clock it lower. And then I would want a powerful NPU for making AI understand what you're saying, so you don't need to. So, like, if you typed it out or said it, like you're playing again, the example I give. You're playing Fallout, a guy runs up to you. You don't have 4 options. He just says, "Where do you want me to go?" And it's like, "Let's attack that town." And he's like, "Over there? Okay, let's go." Because he just actually understands you because he uses the NPU to do that. Yeah, I'd want that. Unified 10 or 12 cores of Zen 6 or Zen 7. And I mean, I'd want at least 72 compute units of like RDNA 5 or better. It's 4 years from now. Will be multiple architectures in the future. I don't think that would be cheap, but I think they could put that in a $700 package, $600 package, and they would have something that is wildly stronger than what we have now. So, no, I would not be satisfied. What you're describing to me, by the way, is something that would be, well, the CPU is a lot stronger. Let's just talk about the GPU. Like Games Lord, your example is something that would be like 30%, probably like 10 to 30% stronger, maybe even similar performance to the PS5 Pro. That's what you're describing because it uses RDNA, more compute units with RDNA 3.5 or 4. It's like a hybrid of future RDNA architectures as usual. So they already can get it probably close to like 7900 XT performance. So your question is becoming like, do I want the PS6 to only be like 20 to 50% faster than the PS5 Pro? No, it's got to be way stronger than that. Which actually, let me put down a timestamp here. PS6 Performance, and then let me put this here because I actually do have an update on the PS6 release date. Not PS6, sorry. Calm down. Don't share. PS5 Pro release date, which is, I think I'll probably have a leak about this soon, but this is you could probably count this as a leak, but I'm fairly confident they're going to announce it in September and release in November, the PS5 Pro at this point. Like, that is what I'm hearing. I just thought I would openly tell you guys that while we're already talking about PlayStation. And so let's continue with those questions. Ronigan writes in and says, a while ago, you mentioned something about how some future generations of consoles might have literal RAM as storage. Well, or close to literal. I was wondering if you can divulge anything on what kind of storage technology you're referring to. Just like, you know, there were two crazy ideas I had. It says not anything of me saying I'm sure or I think they definitely should, but it's like when you look at what AMD's doing with Vcache, you got to wonder like if they can fit 32 megabytes of cache on a tiny Zen 5 CCD, what if they had a 400 millimeter square die and then it just had all Vcache on top of it? And then that worked as infinity cache. And like, how much could you accelerate stuff if you didn't have 32 megabytes of infinity cache? We had like a gigabyte, like something like Intel's Adamantine that still hasn't come out, by the way. And I actually think it might be stuck in limbo, just like all the other stuff they're working on next to Royal Core. But like something like that, like you got to think of like what's the next thing for consoles. And at the time, everyone, this is years ago, I was like, well, everyone's obsessed with the SSD in the PS5. So maybe the next big trick they're going to do is an even faster level of storage, which could only be a layer of cache on the die or something like CXL, right? Something like Optane, except not canceled, except now it's canceled. It wasn't back then. Like that's the sort of thing where I wonder if Sony would work towards like only having 32 gigabytes of RAM, so only doubling it again, even though most developers I talk to think it should probably be 40 gigabytes. But then what they have is like, you know, 128 gigabytes of like something in between the speed of RAM and an SSD. And then just a giant but slower SSD, actually. Maybe you don't need that memory controller, an insane one for the SSD. Maybe you just have a bog standard, it'll probably be faster than the PS5s because technology has progressed. But maybe it'll just be like a bog standard Gen 4 SSD that's a terabyte, but then they have 128 gigabytes of almost RAM. And then they can just load the whole game into that. I don't know. That's just something to think about. Um, or like if they could have a middle ground where like they don't even have both, they just have slower RAM, but 128 gigabytes of it. That way you just load the whole game into it. Boom, done. Bob's your uncle, instant everything. You know, you'd have to load the game as it first comes up, but once it's in, no, you wouldn't because it's just all there. So yeah, I mean that's something I was thinking about. At this point, though, I'm not sure about that. I kind of think the neural engine might be the thing if they think they can make that um actually have AI understand you in games and dynamically change things while you're playing. I think that actually might be the direction, but who knows? Could be both. And certainly a neural engine would benefit from storage that fast too. So, but that was my idea, Ronigan. The best ray tracing taken or the best R taken says, hello, Tom. Do you think Sony kind of killed the PSVR 2 by not having Ace Combat and Star Wars X-Wing Squadron and other VR games updated to work with it? Yes. I have a PSVR 2 and I have like 2 or 3 games because to me, nothing looks that interesting. I haven't bought an Ace Combat knockoff because flying games are some of the best things you can do in VR. I agree. I just find it a shame that it's getting abandoned. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's not just Sony though. That's the only thing I could say is keep in mind that like a lot of VR companies are going through problems right now with sales. So I just think we're in a downturn in VR. Like we came, we saw, we had fun. We want something a lot better for like $200. And until you give it to us, no one wants this $2,000 Apple thing or this, you know, this Quest 3 that isn't bad, but it's like what you really do with the Quest 3 that you can still play Half-Life Alex on the previous Quest. It's not really game changing in a way. I think the Quest 2 and the original PSVR, just for how cheap it was and approachable it was, really was. So I just think it's kind of in a downturn. That's the only thing I could say to defend them. Having said that, I do not think they handled PSVR 2 well. It's kind of a disaster and how they decided to do it. Clearly, they thought it was time to get good margins and milk the market, and it wasn't time to go for market share. And I just think that was such a mistake. It should have been wireless. It should have been $200 to $300. They should have taken a small loss on it and taken the VR market. Should have worked with PC on day one as well to take that market. But they just kind of seem to run out of steam and caring about it by the end there. So, unfortunately, PSVR 2 is not. We'll see. Maybe you'll get a new lease on life on PC. But best hopes on that one, I guess. Westfield 90 writes in, can't get consistent answers if my i5 14400F is safe or not. Well, dude, what do you want us to say? Intel won't give us answers. So how can we give you firm answers? Having said that, I think your i5 is probably fine. And if you're worried, I think Windows has a guide out on how to not have it break. It's like lower the RAM speeds, limit the clocks to like 5 gigahertz or lower or something. It was like 4.9 gigahertz. You do that, it shouldn't break. Just do that. You know. Thomas Fisher writes in, Mr. Beast and PDFs use Nvidia. Okay. Great. Great. Um Aeneas of Troy. Oh no, it's Aeneas. Is it Aeneas? Aeneas? I'm sure I look very stupid right now. I give up. But of Troy, Greek name. What are the chances that Nvidia make a new Titan for Blackwell? It's possible. I mean, they're certainly going to have the performance crown, and that would allow them to maybe charge. Not allow them; they can do whatever they want. But that would help them justify charging $2,500 or $3,000 for it. So, what are the chances of Nvidia making a Titan Blackwell? I think decent. I I think that and if you see if you see them do this, the reason they were be going to calling it a Titan is definitely because they want to charge $3,000 like Titan Volta. That's why. That's what they're doing. Okay, and that is all of the rest of the tipped questions here. Let me check this too. ARS currency. What is that? Oh, Argentina pesos. I see. Okay. I was just curious what that person tipped me in as well. Um, Anyways, let us continue with the questions. I have another one here from the Patreon. Remember, you can ask questions free if you support us there. Who says Nathan Sheed writes in and says, "Am I remembering right that Dan was teaching his dog?" Put down a timestamp for this. 2624. Truffle pig. Am I remembering right that Dan was teaching his dog to find truffles, but it would only go after the ones that he hid? If so, my girlfriend said that his problem is probably that it's just smelling him on the truffle, not actually looking for the truffle. That's right. Dan is a hound that he's trying to teach that we're calling the little truffle pig because he's teaching it to look for mushrooms in forests right now. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll mention that to him. I think he's given up on that a little bit, but he also thinks that he thinks that there's definitely evidence that she can smell it, but that she just doesn't get when he wants her to look for it. Oh yeah, someone in the comments says Titan AI. Yeah, I mean, you could that's probably what they would call it, isn't it? They would call it a Titan AI. Oh boy. Just saying that out loud makes me think it's even more likely. All right, so I've gone through all the tipped questions, I've gone through all the Patreon questions. So I'd say I'll probably stop within 10 minutes, but if you have any more, if you're in the Moore's Law is Dead Discord, ask the questions for free in the After Video Chat channel. And then everyone here in the live chat, make sure you hit the like button, but then also put your last questions here. Last call. Let's see. And otherwise, I'll just look for questions that I think are interesting in the live chat for a few more minutes if there's no more tipped ones. Is Xeon okay? Yep, already covered that. It's a sad reality that they don't need to care about consumer PCs because AI is more profitable. Yeah, well, it is what it is. I'm just hoping this causes some pent up demand and more aggressively priced and positioned products next year. Let me see. PSVR 2 on PC, one of eye tracking. That's disappointing. Yeah, I agree. When will 4090s drop in price? I mean, guys, they're buying them up for AI stuff, so there's a reason that they cost that much. And I've also heard that Nvidia is way, way, way winding down 4090 production. So I wouldn't bet on it ever dropping in price, until they announce the next generation. Don't forget AI toothbrushes. Oh, I know there's AI everything now, people. Elder Scrolls Unraveled said that he had a question. What do you think about how schizophrenic Intel is acting with people on Reddit saying they are now honoring RMAs and then a wave of RMAs being declined at Jay's 2 cents? Look, I mean, what's going on right now at Intel is one hand doesn't know what the other's doing, right? And I heard this consistently over the past few days, even after those leaks I put out. Like some people at Intel are hearing this, some people at Intel are hearing that. And I think a lot of the people on Reddit and stuff are kind of just like doing their best. Like I feel bad for the PR people on Reddit like with Intel, because I don't think they have a fucking clue what's going on. And because of that, they're just trying to do their best and then finding out later that what they were told isn't true. So that's what I think is going on. Elder Scrolls Unraveled. Um, Root Knight writes in, when do you think would be the right time for Sony to launch a handheld to compete with the Switch 2? That's a good question. Let me put Vita 2 here as well. I think the right time for Sony to launch a handheld is when it can launch as a PlayStation 6 product. Because if you think about it, and I've given this spiel a bunch of times, but I'll do it again. Sony has two choices here. They can either launch a PS4 because they just started working on it, I believe, a year or two ago. So the PS4 handheld really wouldn't be ready till late next year, really 2026 at the earliest. So do you think they should do that? A PlayStation 4 handheld that launches like halfway through most of the way actually through the generation, right before the PS6 comes out? Or should they just start working on the handheld now and make it just cut down yields, downclocked yields from the PlayStation 6? That's what I think. Hypothetically, right? Let's say the PlayStation 6 has 72 compute units. What if Sony just takes the worst yields, disables them to 36 compute units, and throws it in a 15 10-watt package or something? They way clock it down. They basically turn the PlayStation 6 into PlayStation 5 specs, but obviously it would have higher IPC, so it'd still perform better than a PS5. You could see a situation where they just try to get that down to where it works in a handheld, and then it can use all of the games coming out. What you would do is you just tell developers, eventually there will be a PlayStation 5, a 6 Pro. But right now there's the PlayStation 6 and then there's the PlayStation 6 handheld. Half the compute units clocked lower, so just run it in 1080p instead of 4K. Done. That's the fourth resolution. Could totally handle that. Best part of it, still has 36 compute units, can run all PS5 games, all PS4 games, all of those optimized PS4 Pro games. Boom. What makes more sense from a business perspective? The PS4 handheld now before the PS6 launches, or the PS6 portable when the PlayStation 6 launches? The beauty of the PlayStation 6 option is if it doesn't sell well, who cares? It's just disabled PS6 yields. They won't care. It could be a collector's item. And they wouldn't have to do a lot of software support either, because if it doesn't sell well and they cancel it, it could still run PS6 games you download from PSN for a decade. So that's the move, I think. You want to have that ability to run PS6 games. I mean, maybe even 18 compute units, or maybe they make a separate die, you know, like whatever they have to do to get it into that power consumption so they don't need to make a different thing. I think they could totally get away with charging extra for it too, because it would have its own screen and stuff. So it could be an experiment, dip their toes in the water, and then if it goes well, maybe they do make a purpose-built die that isn't disabled. That's what I think they should do. That's my opinion. Games Lords writes in and says, "Isn't the PS5 Pro rumored to have an RX 6800? No, with 10% faster CPU, which is slower than a 3060. Well, first of all, that's not fucking true, dude. The 3060 is a joke compared to the 6800, the 7700 XT. No, look, it uses. I mean, I already leaked it. What was the teraflops I leaked in that Sony documentation? I mean, let me pull that up here. Because it's not the same architecture as RDNA 3. So no, I think you should expect it to be between 7800 XT and 7900 XT performance, with probably better ray tracing than that because it has components of RDNA 4. And yeah, the CPU isn't much stronger, but it doesn't really need to be. I don't care how many times people bring up that it uses Zen 2. Zen 2 can do 60 hertz, people. And every test I've seen on Digital Foundry where they like have a cracked PlayStation 5 that runs a game at a higher, it's always the GPU bottlenecking when they mess with the settings. It's always the GPU, almost without fail. You know, the only game I can think of that would really have problems is Flight Simulator, and that's not even on PlayStation yet. Probably will be eventually with how Xbox is going. But no, I mean, you're looking at modern high-end gaming performance. We'll see how the ray tracing is. We need to see how good PSSR works. But obviously, the CPU is pretty much the same as the base model, and that's to be expected. It is a console. It's a Pro. It's not the PlayStation 6. They don't want to push it to 8K 120. They want to up ray tracing and have a more stable frame rate with the games that are out now. GamesWord writes in, a PS6 strong as a 4090 would make you happy. I don't know. I mean, how important is ray tracing going to be in 2028? It's 8 years after the PlayStation 5, my friend. I don't know. I can't tell you how strong the PlayStation 6 will exactly be until we're closer to launch, because we need to see how this market innovates. And, we need to see what's out at the time. And then we can decide what they're going to do. Um, duh, duh, duh. Mike Sullivan writes in, "Hey Tom, love your content as always. I've noticed you sporting the stash, beard with stash, and clean shaven lately. Got a preference?" I guess my preference would probably be clean shaven, but I don't want to shave because I'm lazy every day. So that's all that is. So what happens with my facial hair is the cycle is I don't shave for a while. Usually there's like a week where I'm clean shaven because I actually keep up with it, and then I'm just busy and I don't. And then it gets longer and longer and longer, and then it gets annoying to have. And then I shave everything, but I leave the mustache on because I think it's funny. Also, my girlfriend likes the mustache too, so that's part of it. But then the mustache gets too long, and it becomes hard for me to like eat soup, and that's where I'm like, and done shaving. So that's the Tom facial hair cycle. Clean shaven, then I get lazy, then I think it's funny. Every time I have a mustache for the first time of the month, um, in a die shrink recording with Dan or a broken silicon, Dan turns on the camera and he sees my handlebar mustache and he just starts laughing. So, if anything, just to make Dan laugh, I like randomly having a handlebar mustache. But then it becomes too annoying for me to keep wearing there. Um, let's see here. What do you agree? Is the PS5 closer to a 6700 or a 5700? Those aren't that far away from each other in performance. You're like splitting hairs over 20%, aren't you? It's a 6700. I mean, it's 36 compute units, but it has a 256-bit bus, but it doesn't have infinity cache. It's a 6700 in performance. All righty. I think that's everything there. I wanted to take Jesse Dog to the dog park before it gets too dark. So, yeah, I think I'm going to end it there. I'm clearly talking about my facial hair regimen, getting a bit off subject. Maybe it's time to stop the live stream. So, I want to thank everybody for watching it. And actually, just a FYI for everybody, Alderon, so a representative from Alderon Games, this person who's been in the news a lot recently about the Intel Raptor Lake issues. Next guest on Broken Silicon. I'm about to put out the reader mails for the guest now. Join the Patreon at the lowest tier, the $2 tier. You can ask people from Alderon Games questions about what they think about Intel Raptor Lake failures, Zen 5, RDNA 4, and the PlayStation 5 Pro. They actually have a lot of thoughts on how the PlayStation 5 Pro will perform. Join the Patreon, people. We cannot do this without our patrons. This is going to be a fantastic guest. And then again, make sure you're subscribed to the Moore's Laws at YouTube channel. Subscribe to Broken Silk on your podcast app of choice. I'm sorry that the podcast version of the last Broken Silicon didn't hit the podcast feeds until a couple days later. I didn't notice. I had to like refresh the feed and then it worked. It was a weird error that happened with Spotify and a few other places. So that's fixed now too. But please give us reviews and subscribe to us on the podcast app of your choice. And then, yeah, that's basically it. Like, share the video. Thank you so much for watching. Have a fantastic weekend, everybody.